All right, welcome to our Tuesday afternoon soiree with Edgar Cayce and myself. Steve Bobbitt again here to provide you lovely insight. This is a heavy-duty one. A heavy-duty presentation here because what the presentations previous to this always dealt with a single chapter. This is 3 chapters, compressed into a 2-hour love fest here. So there's likely to be a lot of movement going on here where we're going to hit some topics and kind of go with it because we have a lot of material to cover, being that we are covering destiny of the mind, destiny of the body, and destiny of the soul, all wrapped up into one presentation. As always, the information presented here today is based on my personal research. This is my interpretation of my studies of the Edgar Cayce readings on this topic. You are more than welcome and encouraged to go in and study for yourselves and come to your own conclusions. Okay? You'll be able to accept or reject based on your personal views and what you take away from this. Okay? Starting off with destiny of the mind, Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." You need to ponder that for a little bit. Because what he's saying is that there's more to our mentalities than what we actually recognize. This is built into our unconscious minds in a lot of ways, and we don't always reconcile the thoughts that we have or understand why and where they are coming from. Consequently, we just tend to brush it off and say, oh, well, that's just the way it was. But in fact, is that true? Dr. Jung said no. It's not, because we've got to learn to make our unconscious minds and processes, bring them forward to the conscious mind, which is, in fact, we can do. And when you look into the Cayce readings, he talks about 3 types of minds that we have. We have our conscious mind, our subconscious, and then the superconscious. The conscious mind is the mind that we use right now. You're using your conscious mind to interpret my words, to hear and process the information. However, there is a lot more going on behind the scenes. We have our subconscious minds. In our subconscious minds, we might say that that's responsible for all of the things that are happening outside of the main stage. For example, have you just had a conscious thought to breathe, or was that a subconscious reaction? We didn't have a conscious thought, so I need to breathe right now. And we don't have those. Why? Because they're automatic, they're involuntary. This is partial of the subconscious, but it affects our conscious being and our conscious minds because we do, in fact, need to do minor things like breathe. Now, the subconscious also provides a gateway for us up into the superconscious mind, which is our true connection with all things, with God, where we're able to come in and actually tap into the bigger pictures where we are able to commune with God. There's a line that goes all the way through here that we just cannot see. But we can do this. When we go into meditation, aren't we activating the silver cord that will enable us to talk to and receive and listen to the small voice within? And in Cayce parlance, he also talked about The subconscious and superconscious combined being the unconscious mind, as opposed to the conscious mind that we use on a regular basis. Our unconscious mind is much bigger than our conscious mind. But the ego is in our conscious minds. This is our survival. This is our material instincts down in here. But from where are we drawing on our survival? In a lot of ways, it comes from our subconscious minds. So consequently, what we're seeing is like an onion. Okay, we're just pulling back layers of the onion because it's in here of our conscious mind, which is very limited. Note of the three, it is the smallest, but it's also the noisiest, right? And what is the old adage about the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? And that's your ego. That's in the conscious mind. And this is where we're starting to see all of these things coming into play at one time. When we talk about mind, mind is of God, and we were created with the intent of becoming companions and co-creators with God. And you might say that he actually lives through our perspective. In how we conduct ourselves, he is actually learning. We are all a piece from him. We have, quite honestly, the same powers that he does. But it was through our misbehavior that we did not go in and tap it. We have forgotten how to use it. Cayce always called us, we were co-creators, and quite honestly, we may not think about it right now, but we actually do in fact create at this level. I'll explain that going forward. Okay? Destiny is an immutable law. Mind gave man his soul. Consequently, we are part of God. In part mind, part soul. And it's only the soul, because that's from where our origins lie, that may be at any time in presence with the Father. Our bodies will not. Flesh and blood cannot inherit eternal life. But because our souls came from God, God is eternal. Consequently, our souls are eternal as well. Very interesting concept here that John puts forward with respect to how all this comes, and it's very similar to how a zygote goes in, and it starts off as a single cell and then it subdivides, doesn't it? Now we have two. Then what does it do? It divides again, and it just keeps multiplying. And we could take the consciousness of God and say that's exactly what he did. He basically subdivided himself into an infinite number of other souls. Consequently, we are all sparks of the same soul. And we're working to become back in his presence. Because he gave us everything that we needed. We just had to follow the rules. And this is where the free will came in, is that our free wills is what caused us to be disobedient. You've heard the adage, well, why did you do that? Because I can. And that's very similar to what we've done back in the day. And we need to now learn to overcome this. And overcoming it is going to be quite the problem here, because that's why we are here. We got what we wanted. All right? We got what we wanted. Our ultimate destiny, the law of destiny, is fulfilled by love. God is love, love is law. And it's through love that we spiritualize our bodies. And when we do this, what we are tapping into is the key purpose for our existence, which was to be co-creators and companions in loving ways. And we have forgotten how to be lovely because in the creation part, when the fall happened, there was a lot of selfish activity on behalf of those who used their free will in unloving ways. It was a choice. And God has willed that our souls do not perish. That's his desire. But by the same token, we've got to learn from our mistakes somehow, some way. And this is where the other part of universal law comes in that we'll talk about, and it's called reaping what you sow. And that's the consequence of free will that we have for weal or for woe. If we put out loving thoughts, words, and deeds, what's going to come back to us? Love is going to return. We didn't do that for a while. We were negligent, let's just say, in our activities towards our other spiritual beings here. We were very selfish. Cayce tells us that the only sin is selfishness. The only sin is selfishness. And if you think about it critically, you take the 10 Commandments, you can trace each and every one of them back to selfish activity. In some way, shape, or form, you can, in fact, do that. Okay? So because we have forgotten this, we need now to learn how to redevelop our at oneness with God. He brought us here, and now it's intentional for us to come back. And he provided a way of escape. He saw what we were doing down here, and he wasn't necessarily amused, but he didn't throw the babies out with the bathwater. He gave us a way to basically repent, to learn, to be able to take the hate and jealousy that was, rampant and replace it. And this is through our fellow man. And this is the same material and the same behavior that Jesus exhibited not only in his entire life, but more importantly in his darkest hours. Because there was a lot of, let's just say, hate and jealousy going on because they wanted to get rid of him because he was a troublemaker. And once sentence was passed, then they kind of had their way for a while. But he did not react in like towards him. He always put forth the love. Okay? Very important for us to think about. We were indeed created in his image. We know that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are one. Cayce tells us that the mental body, the spiritual body, and the physical body are one as well. Each has their own attributes, their own precepts, and their own ideals. We understand that we live in a three-dimensional world. Consequently, there's a tendency for a lot of stuff to happen that's related to threes. We have the three-strike rules and the three-strike laws. Right? We have, when we're talking about people dying, how many times have you heard they always go in threes? Have you heard that? Right? When people die, absolutely, yeah, we come in here. And consequently, we're always working with this, so we're dealing with it. And each body is different. Our physical body is different from our mental bodies and our spiritual bodies, but they all need to be working together. And if you think about it, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit do in fact work together in unison. On the human side of things, we need to make sure our bodies are working together as well. And if you've ever been sick, if you ever had illness, things are not aligned. There's a disconnect between your mental, your spiritual, and your physical bodies. That's when illness occurs. Because one's overloading the other side. You need to understand and try as a whole to keep everything in play here so that it's aligned. And if it's aligned, then energy flows. There's no blockages. Okay? We are but shadows of the triune. Cayce tells us that the body physical is of man. That's us. The body mental is of the Christ. And the soul body is of the Father. This makes perfect sense if you think about it. We have the spark of the Creator within us. We're part of Him. Consequently, that's our souls. Christ, the mental body, actually shows us the way. They call him the Savior. That doesn't mean he's going to come pluck us out of the water. That means he's going to show us what we need to do. And then, for us to get out of the water, it has to be a mental, conscious choice. Consequently, the mind is of the Christ. Because we have to choose to follow that path. And if we choose not to follow that path, then we can. That's a choice too. But do remember, we shall reap what we sow. And this is how and why reincarnation came back in, so to continue to learn the lessons and to find different beings so that we can get our souls back on board with Him. Okay? What we see in the physical has its origins and its roots in the mental. The physical, anything, is a manifestation of a mental process. Cayce, in 89 separate readings, stated that the mind is the builder. And we need to really embrace this, because if you just look around, look at all the physical things in this room. Everything had its origins in what? What was the first origin of that chair, of that table? A thought. Where did the thought come from? Left field? No, it came from the mind, right? The mind was the builder. It started to manifest this. And when we start to think about in our minds things that are spiritual and everlasting, what are we going to create? We're going to create spiritual and everlasting manifestations. If we focus on material manifestations, then we're going to create those. But we've got to recognize this. Things of the material will change. They're based on environmental conditions. But things that are based on the spiritual last for eternity. God is eternity. God's not going away anytime soon. And because we are part and parcel with Him, we ain't going anywhere either. All right? These sexy bodies we running around in and going somewhere, but, what's in here and is not. And when we think about this and we talk about the three parts, you've heard of the I Am, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. The three parts of the soul. The spirit, the mind, and the will. And when we look at the three parts of manifestation, this is a very, very powerful statement. The spirit is the life, the mind is the builder, the physical is the result. It is in the spirit that is the life, that is the energy flow. The mind is going to take that energy and mold it. And what comes out is the physical. Think about the spirit as being electricity. That's your flow. The mind is your light switch. Lights are going to be what? On or off, right? That would be the physical result. But you're using all three together in the same ways. Okay? Consequently, we need to learn that these components are always there. We have the spirit, the mind, and the will. The will is the strongest force in the universe, as you will see. Cayce tells us that in the beginning, the mind of God moved and matter formed. That's how he described it. It was the mind of God moved. Interesting way of putting it, but that's how he looks at it. And from there, heaven and earth were created. And when we think of our minds, we are looking at things that are both spiritual and material. Because we have a mind and we have a soul, and they're all working in together. The material mind needs to be in consonance with the goal of the spiritual mind. But it doesn't have to be, because it is free will, and it will be written on the soul. And when we start talking about this, what physical matter is an expression of spirit in motion. What spirit? The mind. The mind, thoughts are things. Thoughts are things. Where are they coming from? Physical matter is an expression of spirit in motion. Think about the previous slide. Okay? And that's what we're doing. And do you know, we know that our physical bodies are matter, but the readings also tell us that the soul is a different form of matter. It's a different form of matter. Our souls are actually matter. All right? I always thought that to be pretty interesting. Our minds are always going forward. Could we say that if our minds are going forward, that God's mind's also going forward all at the same time? I think so. I do believe so. We know in Proverbs, I think 23:7, that for as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And what do we do when we have our heart set on something? Do we focus on it in our minds a lot? Do we think about it a lot? Yeah. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to build it. We're actually going in and trying to build that which we desire. It could be spiritual desires. It could be physical desires. But that's what our focus is going to be on. And then based on how we're thinking, we are setting forth the way that we can achieve our purposes in life. What we're down here actually to do. Or not. Because we have free will. And when we constantly think what we're doing, we are effecting change. Okay? And constant thought is constant building. Because if we're always thinking, then what are we doing? The mind is the builder. We're always coming out with different ideas and processes and concepts. And we're always working to tell us about where we're going to go next, what we want to do next. Okay? And it's very, very important for us to recognize the power that we have because, well, God is the creator. I'm just a person. No. We are co-creators. How many times have we thought about something that we wanted and it actually came into fruition? Where did that come from? We may not have attributed it to ourselves, but we built it ourselves because we were focusing on it. Okay? And we talk about how Jesus was. He taught us to think constructively, positive thoughts. Now, in the Bible, we know that there are several miracles that Jesus performed, right? Fed 5,000 peeps with a fish. Turned water into wine, right? Now, were those miracles, or did he have a better understanding of proper thinking and more universal law. We, because we don't understand it, or people at that time didn't understand what was going on, they termed it a miracle. Wow, it happened. But was it really a miracle, or was it just a normal consequence of constructive thinking? And if he can do it, why can't we do it? Our free will, we too can choose to glorify God in our daily lives, or we can use it for self-gratification. It's a choice. What did Jesus do? Was he out there about the I, me, my? I don't think so. And consequently, what was his focus? His focus was always on doing things constructively with his thinking and his physical being that would be able to glorify God. He wasn't worried about any of the drama that was running around in life. He came across people that he met. He had a mission that he needed to go. He had to get that word out there. And what did he do? He thought constructively about it. And he said, okay, Father, bring to me these people who I need at this time to do your will. And bingo, they showed up. And when he was able to do these miracles that people call them, then what was he really doing? Wasn't he telling us that, hey, you could do this too? Because he was just a mortal man, just like us. But what separated him? Doesn't he have his origins the same place as we do? Yeah. But what did he do differently? His focus was where? On the Father. It wasn't on Tammy Sue down the lane or some other thing. He wasn't worried about Grey's Anatomy or something. He was worried about glorifying the Father in his thoughts, words, and deeds. Consequently, because his focus was there, he had the connection. We are going in that same way. We're going down that same path. We too will have that. We too will have that. We're just sneaking up on it very slowly. Okay? But Jesus is the pattern. And a lot of it, of things that he did to this day, we still don't get. Because we are limiting ourselves in our thinking as opposed to expanding our horizons and actually thinking critically about this. When we talk about our minds in action, this is kind of what we've got going here. We have two choices, okay? With our free will, we can choose to make loving choices, or we can choose to make selfish choices. That's where we're at. And quite honestly, what we oftentimes do is that we just kind of do one of these things here, back and forth, up and down, see. But the name of the game is to get the processes up here. And the loving choices, constant. This is where Jesus was. This is where the rest of us was. Okay? And what we've got to do is use this, the strongest force in the universe, to, in fact, start making loving choices consistently. Not just one-offs. We can't be a part-timer about this. We've got to do it full-time. We've got to jump in and commit ourselves to making these choices. And you know what? It ain't easy, because we've never really thought about this a lot. And oftentimes we tend to fool ourselves. We'll tell ourselves stories. We'll make things up about how cool we are and how loving we are. But when we're challenged, we have to actually revisit that conversation because it may not necessarily be true. And again, facts are pesky little things that we don't necessarily like. So how do we do this? How can we focus our intentions to start making loving choices consistently? Cayce tells us that it's through a process called setting an ideal for our physical and mental and spiritual selves. And what an ideal is and how it differs from an idea. An idea is a general concept of how we would like to conduct business. An ideal is living it, is actually doing it. It's forcing these concepts to the front and center parts of our conscious minds and then following through. Following through. And when we do this, we start to shift away of our attentions away from all of this material stuff and focus on the bigger picture, meaning longer, everlasting life. That's attributed through spiritual living here in the material. The biggest thing that we have to help us is each other. Because we're all in the same boat. We're all in this together. And we need to find out how we're going to be able to do this. And how we are going to overcome ourselves. Well, what do we need to do is start focusing on what's truly important. There's a disconnect in this world right now between want and need. And if I look around and I see all these, kids the kids have to have an iPhone. They have to have this. They have to have that. Really? I don't know how in the hell I made it 40 years without a cell phone, but I somehow pulled that off. And I guarantee you, I would not have a problem if I didn't have a job throwing that puppy down the toilet. Because I was quite good without it. I don't need to be in constant contact with everything. Because what is it? It's a distraction. It's nothing more than a distraction. We're so caught up in everybody else's drama. Little Susie cut her toe. Johnny's dating Sally. My God, did you see what happened on this TV show last night? All it is a distraction. Because we're not looking in. We're getting caught up in the material world. We're in this world. Nothing we can do about that. But it is a choice whether we have to be of this world. Of this world means we subscribe to all of the things that are going on. Going into with, all of this drama and, unmitigated sex and this and that or whatever, or are we going to focus on what's important? How can we best help somebody? And that's where we get a disconnect because we've always been taught it's all about me. What they call the 80s, the me generation. Yeah, it hadn't really changed much. We talk about the mind as related to the physical body. Our souls choose to manifest in material bodies, thus giving the mind an expression in the physical plane. We choose on a spiritual basis because we know what our levels that we are lacking in. Our souls know the full picture. When we choose to enter into this material plane, actually make a lot of choices to where we're going to start. Because what we're doing is we're putting ourselves in the environment that we need to be in order to learn those lessons. But you see, that's only half the battle. That's only half the battle. Because once we get there, we have this thing called free will. And our egocentric minds, of our conscious mind, starts working together, and now we're going to make choices which may support the soul's purpose, or it may not. It may not. But that's the power of the free will, and we have got to learn to overcome the material in order to give us the spiritual essence that we need to continue our going into the everlasting. Remember, what does it say about infinity? It goes both ways. You are here. What were you doing over here? What are you going to do over here? But right now, you're just a dot right here. Cayce tells us there is no time on the other side, by the way. No time and space. Consequently, we understand that it's the mind being the builder. This is going to develop our physical bodies. Have you ever heard the term, you are what you eat? Yeah. Yeah. And if you think about how things are going now, and how the mind builds, if you choose to sit on the couch, watch TV, and eat potato chips, what is going to happen to your physical body? You're going to end up looking like a bag of chips, ain't you? Yeah. Right? Because what are you doing? It's not so much what are you doing, but what are you putting in? What are you not doing? I mean, your thumbs have got some very strong thumbs from working the remote, I understand. But the rest of the body ain't doing much other than going to the refrigerator and back. You see? And then what happens? We make a choice. We choose this type of behavior. The mind is the builder, the physical is the result. For every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, and you shall reap what you sow. And that's kind of where we're going with this. But people don't recognize this. You know, we can control a lot of things, but yet we are still lacking in self-control. You can teach a dog to roll over, teach him to bark, teach a dolphin to jump through a ring. But can you control yourself? Not in a lot of ways we can't. Now, as human beings, we've got a lot of questions regarding destiny. Is the destiny of the mind set at birth? Are our thoughts predetermined? Are we destined to have specific encounters? Is our lifespan already set? All of these things come into play. And the answer is, the only thing that's predestined is that we are going to be given ample opportunities in our physical lives to be able to fulfill the purpose that we set for our souls when we came into here. And it is a factor of our choices and our wills that are going to build our physicals. That's what we're doing. We're going to basically use our choices and our free will, and that's going to be what we build. We are not predestined. God does not know what we're going to do next. As the master calculator, he can run calculations with the infinite number of possibilities of what we will do with respect to making loving choices and with respect to making selfish choices. But until we do it, he does not know what we will do. Because, quite honestly, and as Cayce tells us, each individual has the choice, which no one has the right to supersede Even God does not. That's a powerful statement. That's a powerful statement. But it makes perfect sense if you think about it. Why would God supersede our choices? Well, quite honestly, he wouldn't. Why not? Because he has universal law in play. We're going to reap what we sow. And if we choose good, then the good's going to come to us. If we choose bad, we'll figure that out too. So why would he supersede our choice? That's what our free will does. Strongest force in the universe. That's our free will. And that's what it means. Right there. And that's a big statement. That is a very, very big statement in a lot of ways because people don't think about that. It's the price we pay for being in materiality. Right? It's a gift. Our free will is actually a gift from God. But we have our opportunities. He's giving us the opportunities. What we do with them is up to us. Did your parents give you things when you were young? And did they tell you how to use them? Or did they leave it up to you? They gave you some basic instruction, but they didn't tell you how to always do everything. God's the same way with our experiences here. We do something, we don't do it right, we end up on the wrong side, we're in trouble. And then guess what? Well, we'll figure it out. We have reincarnation. Note to self, don't do that again. Keep your finger out of the light socket. It doesn't work so well. All right? And that's fine. And you see, a lot of people are going to want God to supersede their choices. It doesn't work that way. You see, we are not only co-creators, even at this stage in our own meek and mild way, but we're also being groomed for much bigger and better things. Remember, the other side of infinity. You're not always going to be doing what you're doing right now. Jesus told us in the Bible, you too will be able to do this and much more. And Cayce tells us that we, in fact, will have the opportunity to be Christs to other folks who are trapped in materiality. Somewhere down the line, somewhere. Not tomorrow. Maybe not next lifetime. But when we work to it, why can't we achieve that which Jesus did? He said we can. And, there's there's lots of universes out there. We're just focused on a little dot. Our whole solar system is just a dot in the big scheme of things. There's a lot of other places out there. Well, let's talk a little bit now about the power of free will. Strongest force in the universe, as I'm fond of saying. I got a 91-year-old uncle who exercising his power of free will on a regular basis. Not necessarily like what he's doing, but he's making his choices. And I've had that discussion with him. I said, all right, you can do this. But just remember, you're going to reap what you sow. That which we build in our minds, we actually become. And growth is not accomplished by random thoughts like, squirrel! Doesn't work that way. What do we have to do? We have to focus on something and repeat it. Constantly, constantly, constantly. We're going to repeat these activities. We're going to, if you want something, what are you going to do? You're going to build it. You're going to think about it. You're going to start creating these things. Okay? But it's not the inactivities that we need to focus on. It is the purposeful thoughts. What is it that you want to become? What is it that you want? And quite honestly, a lot of people really do not understand the power of thought. They don't associate it with being the builder. And oftentimes when we start to get in here, we want something, we want something, we want something. We focus on it. Let's think back when you were young. You were looking at that cute little guy down the corner, right? Or something along the same lines. Gee, I hope he notices me, and you start thinking and building it, and then one day it comes. But what has happened from the time you had those thoughts to the time something shows up? Things change. There's time delays, aren't there? But now you got what you wanted. Now you're going to have to deal with it. You got it. You built it. Here it is. Well, I don't want it now. Why? Because she's ugly. Or some crap like that. You know? Things change. And this is why it's important for us to focus on things of the Spirit. Because things of the spiritual realm, it's not going to change. Things of the spiritual are love. Unconditional love like our Father gives to us. Okay? If we put out love, worst thing that's going to come back to us is love. Now, don't forget, we don't know about the other side of the current situation, what we've done in the past. So even you might say that even though Jesus was putting out love, how did his life end? And it would have to be not so good. But why? Well, we don't know exactly why. And we all don't know exactly why bad things happen to people we perceive as good people either, do we? But they do happen. But could we state that, would it be fair to say that if it's God's will, then it's going to happen, whether we want it to happen or not? Even though somebody we perceive as a sweet young thing like me, and oh my God, he's got a broken leg, why would that happen? How could he do that? Well, maybe there was something hidden in the closet that needed to be met. Do you remember too, karma is a two-sided thing. We always think, well, that's karma when people have bad things. But isn't there good karma as well? Certainly there is. So when we have love and things coming into us, it could also be something that we've done in the past that's coming back to us now. And these are universal laws, and the thing about it is it's not going to be what we want when we want it, but it's going to be when we need it. And that's the difference between our material and spiritual stuff, because we don't have the full picture. How then can we control our days on the earth? Is it up to us, or is it a gift from the Father? Both. We're co-creators with him. We can do what we want. If we think and live the life of love in him, that is life, that is love, we fulfill the destiny which he has purposed for us. Love is law is love. God is love is God. It's a choice. Extending loving thoughts is always a choice. We always need to understand that if we put that out, it's going to come back. But we have a choice of putting something else out there too. Rest assured that that's going to come back to us. The relationship of our minds to our souls is governed by universal law. Very, very similar in nature to the propagation of the species in the vegetable and animal kingdoms. And we've got to understand that there are forces at work which we do not always see or recognize because we don't think of these terms all the time. Okay? And when you're looking at this, think about a garden. Okay? Think about a garden. Let's say you want to have tomatoes. So you get a tomato seed and you stick it in the ground. All right? You till the soil, you put fertilizer and nutrients on it, and you water it and you stick the seed in the ground, right? What happens? The seed does its thing. At the end of the gestation period, voila, there's a tomato, right? We understand that, don't we? Pretty similar. We thought we can get that concept. Now let's take our tomato and call it a thought. What environment are you putting that thought in? What type of an environment are you attaching to that thought, that seed? Is it a loving environment or is it a negative environment? And these are the active forces that we are giving to expression through creation. And this is what happens. Our thoughts are a lot like the tomato. What are you going to do? If you want something, don't you want to take care of it? Don't you want to water the plants and make sure that it's got good soil to grow in? Absolutely. And that's the same thing with our thoughts, but we don't always think about it that way. Why? Because we have always been taught to watch our words and watch our deeds. Nobody ever told me watch your thoughts until I got into the Cayce material. Thoughts are things, and they will come back. Needless to say that perhaps we need to put a little bit more work on it. Because these are the things that are going to come into fruition for us. If we're going to focus on spiritual matters, then the soul becomes spiritual. Alternatively, if the mind dwells on self-satisfaction, self-indulgence, self-exaltation, selfishness type stuff, what's the soul going to do? It's going to become at variance with God. Simple as that. We are right now caught in between. We fluctuate up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Because now we know what we need to do. We need to start changing so that we can get up on the upper end of things. So that we can go in and to start working it deeper. Gandhi, your beliefs become your thoughts. Your thoughts become your words. Your words become your actions. Your actions become your habits. Your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny. Reaping what you sow. Reaping what you sow. Very, very good. And this is us reaping what we sowed. We made choices. We decided to go down here while others hung around up there. But that's fine. We'll get back there sooner or later. Thoughts plus emotions plus behavior gets results. Thoughts plus emotions plus behavior equals results. Okay? When we put forth positive, loving thoughts at all times, Christ-like in nature, then what we are building are environments where we can in fact be at one-ment with God. Phrased differently, positive thoughts plus positive emotions plus positive behavior equals desired results. Bad things are going to happen. We know that. That's life. But do we have to take it at face value, or could we put a positive spin on a bad situation? Can we turn a negative into a positive? That is a choice. And it comes down to us wanting to do that. But this is what it's all about. It all starts up here, right between the ears. We also have signposts along the way. People like to use astrology and numerology and palmistry, all of the ologies out there. And they oftentimes confuse these as destiny. They are not. Things of the astrology and the numerology and palmistry and all of these other alternate ways of looking at stuff are nothing more than a reflection of general tendencies or urges. They are not ruling influences. There's a distinct difference in how Cayce views astrology than how your astrologers of the modern time look at it. They feel that, well, because this is that and this is over here and we got this planet over here, then this is going to happen. That's not true. That's not necessarily true what Cayce says. Each planet in and of itself has its own learning values, tendencies that we can go into. And we have these with us. This is where your birth signs and stuff come into play, because now you're starting to look at what your general tendencies are going to be. But it doesn't have any effect whether this planet is here or there, necessarily. It's just a reflection on us. None of this can overrule free will. Okay? You can be getting the most awesome sign, astrologically speaking. But you have a choice to accept or reject with your free will. These things are a lot like candle lights when we use them to find our ways. You can help them to use them to keep yourself attuned to God and to creative forces. And open your minds to it. Now, y'all have heard about Mercury retrograde, I believe, right? Mercury retrograde is when it looks like Mercury starts to spin backwards, but it's actually not. It's just the way it's perceived in the rotation of things. And when this is happening, it's usually, astrologically speaking, not a good time to be doing contracts or making agreements or, having brain surgery or anything like that, because, things tend to go wrong. And it's in this area here that we often find things that often go awry in our lives. But if you look at it and say, okay, does that mean that, is this Mercury potentially spinning back, that it's causing that? Absolutely not. It's absolutely not what's happening. We have influence and urges that we're going to have to deal with. And oftentimes it helps us to become attuned to practice those things which we need to. For me personally, it's always patience that seems to raise its ugly head in around these time frames, which is coming up again very soon, like in about 2 weeks. So we're going to be, it's time to practice some of these things. And when these things happen, I don't attribute it to Mercury retrograde. I look at it as an opportunity to practice patience and taking what perceptually could be on the surface, a negative event, and turning it into a positive event. The mind is the builder, so why focus on the negative when you can put a positive out? Know what I mean there, Vern? Okay, let's migrate now into the destiny of the body. And with respect to the destiny of the body, it's going to depend on us. Because you see, there's a very, very close relationship of the destiny of the body with the destiny of the mind, because one happens to build the other. We are what we think. We are what we eat. What we hold in our heart, we become. And this is how we build these things. Consequently, the relationship between body, mind, and soul are in fact intertwined, which is why this was done in basically 3 different chapters. And when we talk about what our bodies are, in essence, they are atomic structures. And our structuring is subject to laws of the environment, which means our earth that we're in, heredity, and our soul development. Cayce tells us that each atom in and of itself is a replication of the universe. And you think about that, each and every one of us, how many atoms do we have? Well, many. Our souls are attached to our physical bodies because it's through our thoughts, words, and deeds and our actions and whatnot that our souls are getting written upon. These are the Akashic records of everything that we've done, everything that we've thought, everything about us in all of our lifetimes is on our souls. Consequently, we can go in and start to looking at it. Now, the body, as the Bibles will tell us, and even the Torah and other religious books, the body is the temple of the living God. We have a choice what we want to do with our body. Now, we don't always think of our bodies in these terms as being temples of God, but that's because our conscious egocentric minds are driving the thought and the conversation elsewhere. Again, it's our free will. God doesn't know what we're going to do with the bodies. He doesn't know what choices that we're going to make. How am I going to look at these things? And what am I going to do with it? And we have to also recognize that our bodies are not our souls. Our bodies have a shelf life on them. But our souls don't. Our souls are eternity. They're going to be here forever. And God has destined that no soul shall perish. It's up to each and every soul to choose to be with or without the Father, without God. That's a choice. Cayce tells us that he was asked, actually, has any soul been banished or perished? And the answer that came back from Cayce was, not yet. That was over 100 years ago. That hadn't happened yet. He also put a statement in there along the same lines that said, for how long can man defy his maker? Eventually, you will be beaten into submission simply because of reaping what you sow. If there's a lot of stuff that's built up that's bad, you're going to have to meet it. If it was conducted on this plane, you're going to have to meet it on this plane. And what are you going to do with it? Are you going to continue to do the same things? Because do remember, you will, when you choose to incarnate, you're going to pick the circumstances that are best suited for you. Does that always mean that you're going to continually pick bad influences? Not necessarily. There's going to eventually be a choice that you're going to make that's going to be positive for you, so that you can give yourself a chance. And when we talk about our bodies, think about what we do with them. We like to adorn them for the benefits of our fellow man. We might have tattoos We might have piercings. We might have enhancements of some said forms. Right? But why are we doing this? Why do we do this? Is it for the benefit of enhancing ourselves to help us extrapolate the living God? Or is it for the benefit of other people and perhaps up to a certain extent self-satisfaction? Give somebody to talk about. Right? We never often, especially in our younger years, we don't really give a lot of due thought to why am I doing this. You know, it just seemed like a good idea at the time, and I went with it, you know. And that sometimes it tends to keep going on. But think about all of the things that we do. We don't always truly consider ourselves, our bodies, as the temple of the living God. If we did, would we sit on the couch and eat potato chips all the time? Because that affects us. And if we are here to be of service to our fellow man, how can we be of service to our fellow man if we are in ill health because of the choices that we've made? We really can't. We oftentimes tend to become a burden as opposed to a positive force. And we've got to ask ourselves, how can I change so that I can indeed make myself a suitable place for my soul to dwell that will enable me to be a better service to those around me, if I so choose. Based on how we answer these questions, that's going to give us the destiny of our bodies. Okay? Well, what can we do about this? Well, maybe we try to remember Matthew 22:40 and live the grand command. I will love God with my entire mind, body, and soul, and my neighbor as myself. That's what we need to do. Try to strive to become blessings to others. Be an example to others so as to awaken them. You know, I've always liked that one, and I think y'all saw this in a couple weeks ago when I did the commercial about the Liberty Mutual commercial, where it talks about people seeing other people doing something, and it fast forward and it spurned them into taking a positive action as well. Nothing was said, but it was just, hey, look at what this person just did. And now you have an opportunity to do it too if you so choose. I always liked that commercial. I thought it was a very, very good commercial, and it had a very spiritual base to it. Consequently, maybe we don't always think about it, but people are watching what we do. And we can serve as an example to other folks simply by doing the littlest, the smallest things that may not really, people don't really focus on so much. I, for one, like to go to the store and open the doors for little old ladies. That's my favorite thing to do. Right? Let me get the door for you as I hit the door and it just opens. Right? I just, I give up my full self. All right. Maintaining positive thoughts. Why can't we maintain positive thoughts? Because we tend to focus on the negatives. We focus on differences. When we see situations, people, places, things, we look at the differences as opposed to the harmony within. Consequently, if we don't choose to look for points of appreciation, then we're going to the other side. We're going to look for how things are different. Does it really matter how things are different? No, it really doesn't. People are different. They all come in different shapes, sizes, and colors. And no one individual has cornered the market on any one thing. The same thing goes with countries. The same thing can be said of religion. No one religion has cornered the market on the whole hootenanny of getting back to God. But if we can take a little of this and a little of that, a little of this and a little of that, then I think therein lies the bigger solution. Because it's not one, but it's a culmination of the whole. Certain religions do certain things for certain reasons. They have different values, attitudes, and beliefs that others don't necessarily do. Doesn't mean that they're wrong, it just means that they're different. And Cayce basically, it was described, Cayce's readings was where the Occidental meets the Oriental. Because he's taken modern Christianity, which is basically prevalent thought of the Western world, and he's mingling it with things from Buddhism and other Asian religions. Reincarnation is not really in the Christian Bible anywhere, but it's a big part of the Orientals in Buddhism. And the whole thing about living and going forth, it's a combination of the whole as opposed to a single, well, this is the only way to do it, period. No, it's not. We've got to learn to think critically. And the way we do that is we maintain positive thoughts about what's going on. And our thoughts, depending on how we do it, can become crimes or miracles. Thoughts are things. They're going to go out. It's a big boomerang coming back at you. Consequently, it would behoove us to do right thinking and right acting, being paramount. And to do this, we know that we've got to overcome the world. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world that's just not very loving. And I'm talking about in social media. There's a lot of hate. And, if you really want to find out how hateful people are, get on Twitter. My God, I look at that and some of the comments that come in there are just, it's ridiculous. Somebody's expressing an opinion on a certain thing and gets totally vilified for it. But then there's no appreciation of the alternate line of thoughts. It's just pure hate and jealousy. This isn't the world that we live in. Everybody says it has to be about power, money, and sex. That's what drives the world. But is that really true? I don't think so. That's being of this world. We've got to make the choice that we can let love alone enter into our little sphere. Because if we let love come in, then what's going to go back out is love. Because it's a cycle. What goes out comes back in. So why not make it a loving choice as opposed to getting caught up in all of this humanistic drama? We also tend to be our own worst enemies. And when we feel that we've made a mistake or we erred, we tend to beat ourselves up over it. And that's really not the thing to do. You had an opportunity and you blew it. Okay, that's fine. It's not going to be your only opportunity. We're flawed beings. Consequently, God knows this. His mercy is endless and without limit. Granted, we're on the merry-go-round and here comes that golden ring and I want to grab it. Might just miss it. But won't it come back around again? It'll come back around again. You'll get another chance. And this time you're going to be more in tune to it because it's now on your radar. I missed it this time. I got to get you this time. So now you're waiting for it. We're not getting back in day one overnight. This is a journey. It's going to take time. And this is why we have got to always be patient with ourselves and with our process. There are no shortcuts back. Remember, we paved the road on which we walk. It's a long road. And do remember that oftentimes we're going to want to do good, but the results don't always come there. And is that a bad thing? And the answer, according to Cayce, is no. It really isn't. Because unlike humans in modern day business, we're not results oriented. I remember using that on a resume back in the 80s. Results oriented, I'm going to go get it, right? Sales oriented, I'm going to go close the deal or whatever. We have all this orientation. And Cayce tells us it's actually the try that matters. It's the intent. What are you trying to do? And in the reading that he came up with, there's 931:1. It is the try that is more often counted as righteousness and not the success or failure. Failure to anyone should be as a stepping stone and not as a millstone. When we think about this, we've got to put it into mental perspective, because when we are trying to affect or make an outcome, a desired outcome, oftentimes it's going to involve somebody else who has free will. They have the free will to accept or reject that which you are trying to implement. Well, you can do the best that you can, just doesn't mean that it's always going to come out that way. If you're acting with loving intent for the betterment, then somebody can say, no, I don't want to do that. Same thing with my uncle. I'll know when I'm ready. I'm going to drive. We're fighting this battle about him, wanting to be driving again, even though he can't feel his feet. That's fine. You don't need feet to drive. But again, these are the battles that we're dealing with, and it's the same thing. So, we just go with it. We're trying to help him to do, the best thing. And he's going to do what he wants to do because he can. All right. With respect to the resurrection of the body, we must first resurrect the computer. Computer has free will, obviously, that does not want to cooperate. And it's just not wanting to do this because it too, again, is hung up. Well, it is what it is. So when we talk about this, what has to happen? Well, what has to happen is that we have got to purge our souls of all of the things that we have done in the past. We've got to learn to overcome that which we have done. We've got to admit and own the disobedience which we have done. And it's going to be a process. It's not like flipping a switch on or off. It's going to happen over time. Because think about how many lives that we have had, how many other experiences that we've had. We know not, and probably for very good reason, what we have done in the past. Consequently, we don't know what we're going to have to meet in the future. But we can set the framework for everything right now by focusing on the right things. And when it comes back to us, if we put out good now, there still may be bad stuff happening because there's a lot of stuff that still has to be leveled. But eventually it's going to start to come in the right way. And when we talk about the resurrection of the body, what are we talking about? Talking about resurrecting the one body that we've always had. And that's our souls. That's what's going to turn and come back into resurrection. Okay? It must be purged. But there's no ways around it. We've got to pass under the rod. And when we pass under the rod, what's happening? Okay. In the Search for God material, the books, it says the purpose for which our souls chose to come into this earth plane was to awaken the divine within, which is done through manifesting the fruits of the Spirit toward our fellow man. How can we become masters of a universe down the line if we still get upset because somebody called us a name? You see, we've got to learn to conquer ourselves. And what that means is that each and every one of us have got to learn to get along. And the best way to do that is to keep an open, positive amount of things out there. We are not all on the same page. We're not always going to be that way. But our opportunities lie with each other and how we choose to deal with how others are choosing to deal with us. They may choose to deal with us in a loving fashion, in which time that's great. But what if they're not dealing with us in a loving fashion? Does that mean we need to go tit for tat, or do we take the higher road? We meet it with love. We meet it with love. And that's where we really get to go with it. And when you think about this, the lives that we are living are a reflection of how we have taken the opportunities that God has given us. What have we done with what we have had the ability to deal with? Did we take the money and run? Or did we play nicely with others? Because what we do know is that when we choose to act upon our own accord, without recognizing God for being the giver of all, without recognizing our roles as companions and co-creators, things often become problematic. Because we went and tried to do everything ourselves without consideration or inclusion of God, we end up failing. And we thinking back on our garden example, our thoughts, words, and deeds are, in fact, the seeds waiting to be reaped. And we're going to sow them. We're going to sow them. So why do we want to put bad things out there? We want to put them the best always. Granted, it may not necessarily work right now, but there is a gestation period. Nothing happens immediately on this plane. Everything has a time to grow. The same thing is going to occur with our thoughts, words, and deeds. It's through patience and loving kindness and showing mercy towards others that we ease our burden. We all, as the Bible tells us, must pass under the rod. But if we want to have patience and mercy shown to us, it begins by us taking the first step and being patient and merciful towards others first. Because when we do this, then our lessons will be met a lot easier. Mercy will be shown to us from the Father. It comes down to life and death. We in 3D world down here have kind of got it backwards. We view death as a sad adventure. What's sad about death is that we lose further ability to cohabitate with another person. They stop physical communications and companionships with us and we become sad. However, what actually happens, the human death is like high school graduation. You're done with the learning. It's time to go on to the next step. Are you going to go to college? Are you going to go into the workforce? Are you going to go into the military? What are you going to do? You're going to progress some way, shape, or form. A common saying is, we ask when somebody dies, please rest their soul. May their soul rest in peace. Right? Cayce tells us that don't happen. There ain't no rest for the soul. The soul hits the ground and keeps running. Because remember, what are we trying to do? We're mixing the physical with the spiritual. The body, the physical needs a rest. The spiritual doesn't. Spiritual's always going. Consequently, when we physically cease, our spirit transitions, and we're on to the next adventure, on to the next set of lessons. We go forward. We're not going to be sitting up there on a cloud somewhere stringing a harp, man. We're just we got more things to learn. This is just kind of a waypoint. What we do is between our earthly lives, we've got to go and see what we've done. We've got to have an evaluation of what we did. Quite honestly, we don't remember everything that we have done, much less all of the thoughts that we've had. But everything must be met. All thoughts, words, and deeds must be met. There must be an accounting for each. What and how did we use our free will? What have we learned? What have we demonstrated that we've got? What else remains to be had? And then we off to there. We go start to learn about that, or we come back into the laboratory of life. It's important for us to recognize our faults and our failures. These are our weaknesses. It is what it is. We can try to justify it, but are we really owning them at that time? No, we're not. We know that we have a way out. And we're always asking for, dear God, please, have mercy on me. The way out is through our interactions one with another. And if we truly want to progress and to overcome the world and overcome our personal weaknesses, our individual weaknesses, we must be very, very sincere in how we do it. And what that means is that we've got to recognize and admit that we cannot overcome these things in and of ourselves. We need help. And where is that help going to come from? Perhaps the giver of all gifts. Because when we recognize that we need help and need a way, to progress, we got to be sincere with it. We've got to be very, very sincere with it. And recognize that, okay, I have been negligent in my inclusion of God in my life. I know I need to do better. Maybe we start to include that. Just like healing. Cayce says, well, what if you're just going to go back and do the same thing that you did, why do we need what's the purpose of healing? You're going to heal, you're going to ask for healing, then be purposeful and show how you're thankful for it. If you get healed, then you probably need to make changes somewhere. What are you going to do to implement those changes to glorify God in exchange for physical healing? We don't think about that. We just want to get out of the pain. When we look at Jesus, the whole Bible, his whole story in the Gospels, gives us the hope that we need to succeed. He gave us examples of how to conduct ourselves. He showed us patience. He demonstrated love. He demonstrated love in the darkest time of any person's life. Be just, be honest, be sincere, and fair towards our fellow man. If we do this, irrespective of how we are treated in return, things will be much better because the destiny of the body lies with us. We, again, are the creators. We have been creating. Respecting the destiny of the soul now. Man, in his natural state, is soul, is spirit. That is the image in which we were created. The first creation was indeed spiritual. God probably doesn't look, a whole lot like this. Probably doesn't have 2 arms and 2 legs and a beard and a white robe. That's man's vision of their perception of what God looks like. If you want to know what God looks like, just look around. We are all manifestations of God. Right? Think about our souls like clothes. We have work clothes. We have beach clothes. We have night clothes. We have different types, right? Well, when the soul chooses to come in, it's going to have to dress for the occasion. It's going to have to be ready to do, has to be dressed appropriately. Meaning it's going to come in for its purpose. When you go to a party, a formal party, you wear a tuxedo and an evening gown, right? You going to show up in your pajamas? No. You got to dress appropriately. What this means is that every plane of consciousness that we have, our souls are going to adapt to it. Not just here on earth, but the other planes of where we're at. Our souls are going to adapt. It's going to be ready to go forth. And then we're going to continue to build. Our free will is still going to be with us even after we die. Our free will is there. Okay? Everything that our soul does has to be willful. We have a choice. We have a choice. We can be godlike and uplifting or selfish and degrading. Either or, don't matter. Reaping what you sow, but do remember, all actions are recorded on our souls. And you have got to respond to those. You're going to have to answer for all of your thoughts, words, and deeds. So once again, understanding this, we can start building tomorrow by putting forth loving intents. Because it's much easier to answer for love than it is hate and jealousy and avarice and things like that. And we don't know as human beings how the whole thing plays out. But I do believe that part of it, and there is some certain books out there by various people who have had what's termed near-death experiences, that there is a soul review that goes on. And it's not so much what you did and said and thought that you get to witness, but it's the ramifications of those things that you don't necessarily or didn't know about. You may have said something to somebody, flew off the handle, got really mad, and maybe that caused them to have a bad experience. Is it their fault that they were upset and they didn't see the red light, or was it yours for getting them upset? And these are the things that we're going to have to deal with. So again, what's the worst thing you're going to have to be faced with if you put love out? Those conversations become a lot easier, don't they? The conversations we may have to have. Because oftentimes it's going to come down to acts of omission and commission. What we've done, what we didn't do. So we've always got to think about this. But again, we're not trained to think this. And it's not that we're being judged according to these books, but we're judging ourselves. And that's where the pain comes from, because now we see and we have a different consciousness because we're outside of the material plane, and we see and have a better understanding at this point of what we caused. And it's better for us to have causes than bad to have to deal with, because we will judge ourselves. Our free will is a divine attribute, and our souls are molded by that will. Life is not just here. Life is about the soul going forward. Consequently, it's expressed both here on earth as well as in different realms and different planes of consciousness. It's continual. It's always going forward. The soul doesn't rest. The body needs a rest, but the soul doesn't. And when we look at it, each person is the manifestation of a soul in spiritual, mental, and physical form. And when we think about all of the things that we've done, we have gone all over. Very, very wide expanse of experiences that we don't necessarily recall. We've wandered far and wide. But at the end of the day, we've got to come back to God. And our souls won't die, because God never dies. We're coming back. We're part of the whole. We're creating. We're experiencing. And once we get out of this mundane plane, possibilities start to broaden. Because now we are unrestrained. We're captured in matter. We're down here in this 3D world. We're stuck here. We've got to earn our way out. And when we look at the relations of our three bodies, our physical body is basically our soul's transitory home. Cayce tells us that the soul resides from here to here. This is where this is where the soul is setting on each and every one of us, from here to here. So it's kind of along for the ride. We now have got these opportunities that we're going to have to deal with. And if we think broadly and not very, very specific, it's not about just the right now, the here and now, but going forward, the opportunities that we have presented to us will be chosen differently. And based on how we take the opportunities that we are given with respect to how we deal with our fellow man, it's a direct reflection of our level of attunement to God. Because as you do it to the least of you, you do it to me, says the Bible. And it's a direct reflection. Want to know how good you are with God right now? Think about how you deal with your fellow man. Instant feedback. May not like the answer. We got to avoid confusion, because our soul's earthly sojourns are through the will. There's times when we wake up and say, what am I doing here? What's going on? I'm confused. And there's other times that, based on the choices we make, we have a lot more deeper understanding. The circumstances which we're faced with each and every day gives us a choice to react both in a positive manner or a negative manner. If we act with negativity, then confusion reigns. Confusion goes on. It's in charge. Because it's all this forcing, this fighting that we're seeing within ourselves oftentimes. But if we choose to act with loving kindness, then we are starting to emulate the Christ consciousness. And we are demonstrating our level of attunement with the Father, simply by how we interact with other folks. As human beings, we tend to think we know a lot, and perhaps we know some things, but do we truly understand them? To that I say no. I do know that if I come back here and flip a switch on here, lights will come up here. I know that. I have that knowledge that those buttons control those lights. Don't ask me to explain it. I do not have that level of understanding. I know a little bit, but I don't have the understanding. Why? Because I've never applied myself to the trade of electricity. So when it comes to spiritual development, it's the same thing. We may think we know a lot, but until we truly apply it, and not just once, not just twice, but constantly, it is through there that we develop a level of understanding. Life and the lessons are not like pop quizzes. You just can't slide through it the first time and be good with it. What has to happen is that if you stop and pause and you think about, well, do I want to do this or do I want to do that? You may make the right choice. But you had to think about it. There was a battle going on. Good angel, bad angel saying, all right, which way are you going to go? Then we meet the same thing again. And maybe it takes a little bit quicker time for us to, make a decision. But the point of the matter is, until it becomes the first thought, we do not have understanding. Because understanding needs to be automatic. I'm going to do the right thing for the right reason automatically. I don't have to think about it. Once we start to get to that stage, then we're starting to develop a higher level of understanding. That is the application. These are the lessons that become woven onto our souls and become the active forces which we put forward from our beings. Life ain't easy, nor was it meant to be. Full of trials, full of tribulations, temptations, disappointments. But people will disappoint. God won't. People will disappoint, but God won't. If we put our faith in Him, truly believe, not just say it, but truly believing it, things will become a lot easier. The burdens are lifted off of us. You're still going to have to deal with the situation, but maybe you're going to see different ways to contend with the matter, as opposed to feeling the full burden and getting weighed down by the matter. You see, it's when we try to put the whole burden on ourselves that we're running around like Atlas with the world on our shoulders. That's where we get in trouble. Let God take a little bit of it off. Work with him. Have faith. Invite him into the party. And when we step back and we take a bigger picture of it, and we think about how our soul is actually developing, when we consider the opportunities that we have with the physical body and our minds, this is truly a great experience that we're getting. We need to learn to spiritualize these things. And quite honestly, what it really means is this. Have you ever said grace before a meal? Isn't that a method of spiritualizing your nourishment to give you strength so that you can go forth and do God's work on this plane? Right? Why can't we take it to each and everything that we do? Maybe it isn't just about eating. Maybe it's getting me to and fro safely. Maybe it's guiding my interactions. All kinds of things. Think about what Jesus did. If we start to spiritualize our material being, then we start to work as a master. Because these things are going to grow within us. It's solidifying, being written on our souls, and it's actually going to make life a little bit easier here. And it's a privilege for us to do so. It's a choice. We can make it. We can certainly do it. The spirit that prompts us in a material world arises within the soul and is expressed in our dealings with our fellow man. If we sow spirit, our minds build that which we reap in spiritual value. If we sow materiality, our minds build those things of the earth. It's all a matter of how we're going to act with our outside forces. Everything is a choice. From the moment you open your eyes, you're making choices. How you choose to pursue those choices is up to you. What are you choosing to build at this point? And if we choose to live the fruits of the Spirit towards our fellow man, and we're sincere about it, and we're doing it with purpose, then we are developing a oneness with God. We are abiding with him and inviting him to abide with us. We are all one people. We come in different shapes, sizes, and colors. We have different values, attitudes, and beliefs. But in the eyes of the Lord, we are all the same. There is no difference. There is no difference. We need to embrace that. Understand that everybody has their own personal point of view. And they may be right. And we have to be good with being wrong, because it's quite possible. Our physical actions are to be met in the physical. Cayce tells us that. Everything that happens on this plane must be met on this plane. We're going to meet mental actions in the mental. People are going to think about somebody. They're going to think about you. Spiritual actions will be met in the spiritual. So when we summarize this, we can see that destiny of the mind is to create an at-one-ment with the creative forces or God. We've got to choose to want to have oneness The destiny of the body, totally dependent on us. We're going to build that puppy. The destiny of the soul is to become one with the Creator as we were in the beginning. And when it's all over and done with, this is going to be our ultimate destiny. But it's work, it's process. All right? And that is this.